giant.
Oh hey,
Roaches?
it's the first gun you find in the game.
Oh.
And it fires nukes. For this challenge, I created a mod that overrides every projectile in the game with a mini nuke from the Fat Boy. This applies to every gun, whether held by me or a hostile enemy. If you know the main story of Fallout 4, well, you can imagine a few points where this might end up being extremely challenging. So buckle up and get ready for loud noises and blinding flashes of light as I try to beat Fallout 4, except every gun fires nukes. The rules of this run are no melee weapons or melee attacks with ranged weapons, and for some reason there are a few weapons that the mod didn't affect, such as Gatling lasers and silenced weapons, so no using those either. For this build, I thought my best chances would either to be able to survive a mini nuke blast or to stealth and avoid encounters. So I put my endurance at 10 and my agility at 7, and I put 7 in intelligence as well to help me gain levels at a decent rate. Once I got out of the vault, I headed for Sanctuary. I helped Codsworth with his pest extermination business and picked up Kegogi and headed off to Concord. This is where I realized one of the more annoying aspects of this run. When enemies are fighting each other from a distance, they constantly fire blinding rounds and no one ever dies. I believe this is because Bethesda programmed the game to foreshadow with the sounds of combat but didn't want all the enemies to die before you arrive. This often led me to walking through blinding white light to get close enough for NPCs to actually engage in combat with each other. The first major hang-up came when I walked into the door of the Museum of Freedom. More combat was going on and it was absolutely impossible to get out of the first room without dying. However, as we all know, when God closes a door, he opens a window, or he puts a church conveniently within jumping range of an alternate entrance. I managed to backdoor the enemies to death and I met Preston. I went back to the rooftop and tested out the power armor and the sweet minigun. I unleashed the most glorious salvo of mini nukes upon the poor raiders waiting below. I was excited to take out the Deathclaw, but the raiders yeeted him to another time zone before I could. Before heading to Diamond City, I decided to help out the Brotherhood with their ghoul problem. I felt that the Brotherhood was the most fitting faction to align myself with for this run. I went to ArcJet with Paladin Dance and took care of the synths. I was gonna press the red button, but it seemed that Dance had everything under control. I cleared out the rest of the building and earned the amazing Righteous Authority laser rifle and headed off for Diamond City. On the way, I was blinded by another street war between Diamond City security and the super mutants. These annoying battles happen everywhere downtown, and I'm going to spare you by cutting the vast majority of them out from this video, but just remember, anytime you see me going through downtown, I probably had to walk through a bunch of loud noises and disorienting graphical effects. Piper got me inside Diamond City and I headed to Valentine Detective Agency. On the way out, I watched Diamond City security utilizing appropriate de-escalation tactics.
For family!
Put the gun down, now!
He's a Sith! He'll kill us all!
I learned from this that when an NPC uses an explosive, it can kill other NPCs but not themselves, which is important to remember going forward.
Officer, move along.
I killed Swan for no reason and then I headed into Park Street Station. I blew up a bunch of dapper gentlemen and made Dino extinct. I escorted Valentine out and gave Skinny Malone and Darla their Bonnie and Clyde ending. I headed off to find Kellogg with Valentine and Dogmeat and realized how much I hate that the interact button and the trigger button are the same. I received a bit of an unwarm welcome my first time in Fort Hagen, but that was just bad luck with the patrolling synth looking directly at me as I spawned in. I made my way through Fort Hagen and patiently listened to Kellogg's side of the story. I headed to the roof and welcomed the Pridwin to the Commonwealth.
We need your help.
I met Dr. Amari and entered the mind of a killer like that movie The Cell with Jennifer Lopez. I used this dialogue as an opportunity to run to the bathroom and then headed off to find Virgil in the glowing sea. The glowing sea has mostly creatures without guns, so it was incredibly easy, except for when Nick got a bit too friendly with the fire. I sent the children of Adam to their god and talked to Virgil.
Okay, let's get to work.
He sent me to Green Tech Genetics to hunt a courser. This building full of gunners was an absolute nightmare, and I think this clip encapsulates that perfectly. I eventually made it to the top of the building and had a friendly chat with the courser. I took his Doritos, Cheetos, and Fritos and headed to the Old North Church to meet the kooks at the railroad and headed back to Virgil. This is the point where you give your first indication of which faction you're going to follow, and I decided to go with the Brotherhood. Now, if you thought the salvo I unleashed from the minigun was sweet earlier, wait until you see the vertibird minigun. Yeah, it sucks. If you fire more than a few rounds, you blow yourself up. I listened to Maxon's dissertation and then boarded the vertibird to Fort Strong, which I always remembered starting out up at the Pridwin and not down here at the airport. Apparently the game remembered it up there too because it did the Pridwin downward launch animation and sent the vertibird underwater. But soon we were up in the skies. On the way to Fort Strong, I realized maybe flying wasn't for me and decided to approach from the ground. I took out the super mutants outside, including another behemoth, and headed inside. I finished clearing Fort Strong with this sick triple kill and headed back to Boston Airport to build the transporter into the Institute and quantum leapt inside. I met Father Son and convinced Dr. Lee to leave the Institute. I headed to Sentinel Site Prescott and sent Henry to join the rest of his brothers and sisters in heaven. I placed the signal pulsar and headed back to the Pridwin. I made a promise to Scribe Halen.
All right, I'll hear him out.
I lied.
What you say?
Victoria.
I cleared out the railroad, though Desdemona hit me directly in the face with a nuke, and it was time for mass fusion. If you know the story of Fallout 4 and you've been watching carefully, you'll definitely see what's about to come. This is by far the most challenging part of the run. I said a prayer and boarded the vertibird. The first approach to mass fusion went about as well as I expected. There's no way the vertibird will dodge nukes long enough to land, meaning I would have to fire back. However, as we saw earlier, when I fire a volley of rounds, I take damage and blow myself up. It seemed completely pointless. After a while though, I found little glimmers of hope here and there. I realized if I shot really short volleys, I wouldn't take any damage from my own rounds. I also realized the vertibird doesn't actually blow up. Basically, it keeps going until I die. A couple of times I managed to kill off the first wave and make a full circle around the building. However, no matter how many times I tried, I couldn't get to the point where the vertibird would land. After about 30 deaths, I finally received the landing dialogue and the animation began. However, just before I could jump, I died. I never got that close again. I just kept dying. As I replayed this death over and over like Tom Cruise in Edge of Tomorrow, the futility of this had me reconsidering this challenge. I considered just ending the video here and leaving everyone depressed, which would have been kind of funny. But that's not the American spirit. I decided to regroup and give it one last try. I loaded to right before boarding the vertibird and bought a bunch of jet and stim packs. I used an old school EXP farming trick where I offered to escort a scribe to collect data.
The scribe didn't make that.
If for any reason the scribe is unable to complete the task, you can turn in the quest anyway and receive a portion of the caps and experience reward and repeat as many times as you want. I gained a couple of levels and prepared for another attempt at mass fusion. The first 3 attempts ended in failure. However, I'm now presenting to you the 4th one in all of its uncut glory.
We're taking too much damage, sir. I'll get us above the roof so you can bail out. We're in position. Go! Go!
As my feet touched down on the surface of mass fusion, I wept, realizing I would never accomplish anything as great as that ever again. I went inside and I was basically a sitting duck inside of the elevator, so I used a stealth boy and hid like a coward. I grabbed the beryllium agitator and charged out of the building to freedom. It was finally time to unleash the wrath of Liberty Prime. It sure would have been cool to see Liberty Prime decimating enemies while eating nukes to the face like candy, but unfortunately instead I had to stumble my way through blinding white light, mashing VATS to try to clear out enough synths so I would be able to see again. Liberty Prime used his Care Bear stare to open a path into the Institute. The Brotherhood fought their way through and I dealt with my daddy issues, set us up the bomb, and then gave my fake son his own daddy issues.
I'm not your father. Whoever told you that was lying.
But you are. Nobody told me, I just know it. Why would you say you're not? Don't you love me anymore?
I could never love you. Because you're not really Sean. You're just an imitation.
I teleported to the top of Tenpenny Tower and pushed a button, blowing up Megaton and beating Fallout 4, except all of the guns fire nukes. This was my first challenge video, so let me know what you think in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button and join all the other socials, and remember, to survive in the wasteland, you gotta be efficient.